I stopped pleasing everyone. Japanese minimalism gave me boundaries. Have you ever said yes when everything inside you was screaming no? Ever felt like you're carrying everyone else's expectations on your shoulders while your own needs just sit there, quietly forgotten? What if we told you that an ancient Japanese philosophy could finally teach you how to stop? The breaking point we all know too well. You know that feeling when your phone buzzes and your stomach drops because you just know it's another favor, another commitment, another thing to add to your already overflowing plate? We've been there. We've all been there, actually. There's this constant pressure to keep everyone around us happy, to never disappoint anyone, to always be available and helpful and agreeable. And somewhere along the way, we completely lost ourselves in the process. The thing about people-pleasing is that it sneaks up on you. It starts innocently enough. We help a friend move, we stay late at work even though we're exhausted, we agree to plans we don't actually want to make. And before we know it, our entire life is built around what everyone else needs from us. We become like those old smartphones with 100 apps running in the background, constantly draining our battery until there's nothing left for ourselves. The exhaustion becomes normal. The resentment builds quietly, and we start wondering why we feel so empty, even though we're doing so much for everyone around us. So here's where things get interesting. We stumbled upon Japanese minimalism not through some grand revelation, but through sheer desperation. We were burnt out, stretched thin, and honestly just tired of feeling like a doormat with a smile. And what we discovered completely changed how we think about boundaries, commitments, and what we actually owe to other people. Japanese minimalism isn't just about having less stuff or living in a pristine white room with 3 items of furniture. That's the Instagram version. The real philosophy goes so much deeper than that. It's about something the Japanese call ma, which basically means the space between things. It's about recognizing that the empty spaces, the pauses, the gaps are just as important as what fills them. When we apply this to our relationships and commitments, everything shifts. Suddenly, we start seeing that saying no isn't about creating emptiness in our lives. It's about creating space for what actually matters. There's also this concept called Danshari, which comes from Zen Buddhism and literally translates to refuse, dispose, and separate. Now, before you think we're talking about throwing away your friendships, hold on. Danshari teaches us to refuse what we don't need, let go of what doesn't serve us, and separate ourselves from the attachment to things, including the attachment to being needed by everyone. When we started applying this principle to our people-pleasing habits, we realized we'd been holding on to obligations the same way some people hoard old magazines, thinking we might need them someday. The subtle art of doing less with more meaning. Here's what blew our minds about the Japanese approach. In Japan, there's this beautiful practice called ichigo ichie, which means one time, one meeting. It's the idea that every encounter is unique and will never happen again in exactly the same way. Sounds poetic, right? But here's the practical magic. When you truly embrace this concept, you stop spreading yourself thin across a million shallow commitments and start showing up fully for the moments that matter. Think about it like this. When you're trying to please everyone, you're basically at 100 different parties, but you're not really present at any of them. You're nodding along to your friend's story while mentally writing that email you promised someone. You're at a family dinner, but secretly checking your phone because 3 other people need things from you. Japanese minimalism taught us that this isn't generosity or kindness, it's just fragmentation. And nobody, including us, benefits from our divided attention. The concept of hara hachibu also comes into play here. It's a Confucian teaching that translates to eat until you're 80% full. The people of Okinawa practice this, and they're known for their incredible longevity and quality of life. But we started thinking, what if we applied this to everything? What if we committed to things until we're 80% full instead of pushing ourselves to absolute capacity and beyond? Suddenly, we had this framework that made sense. We could be helpful and present without completely depleting ourselves. We could give generously without giving everything. Building boundaries that actually feel good. Now, let's talk about boundaries because this is where Japanese minimalism really shines. In Western culture, we often think of boundaries as walls, as harsh lines we draw to keep people out. It feels aggressive, almost mean. But Japanese aesthetics teach us something different through concepts like shoji screens. These are those beautiful peeper screens you see in traditional Japanese homes. They create separation and privacy, but they're translucent, they let light through, and they're not permanent or harsh. They're gentle boundaries that still allow connection. When we started thinking about our personal boundaries this way, everything changed. We didn't have to become cold or distant or put up huge walls. We could create gentle, clear boundaries that protected our energy while still allowing warmth and connection to flow through. We could say no to the extra project at work while still being a team player. We could decline weekend plans without ending the friendship. We could set limits with family members while still showing love. There's also this practice in Japanese culture called Enryo, which is about appropriate restraint and knowing when to hold back. It's not about being passive, it's about being thoughtful. We realized that every time we said yes when we meant no, we were actually being disrespectful to both ourselves and the other person. We were making promises we couldn't keep with full energy. We were setting up situations where we'd eventually become resentful. Enryo taught us that sometimes the kindest thing we can do is politely decline from the start, rather than overcommitting and underdelivering. Here's something fascinating. Studies from Japan have shown that people who practice minimalist principles report significantly higher life satisfaction scores. We're talking about real research here, not just feel-good philosophy. When people reduce physical clutter, social clutter, and commitment clutter, their stress levels drop and their sense of control increases. It makes sense, right? When you're not constantly managing everyone else's needs and expectations, you actually have energy left for your own life. We started experimenting with what we call commitment subtraction. For every new obligation someone asked of us, we looked at what we could remove from our plate first. Not in a cold, calculated way, but thoughtfully. Could we delegate something? Could we respectfully bow out of a commitment that wasn't serving anyone well? Could we simply create space before adding more? This simple practice changed everything. Our calendar went from being a chaotic mess of overlapping obligations to actual having breathing room. And you know what? The people who truly cared about us understood. The ones who didn't? Well, that told us something important too. The Japanese concept of mottainai also helped us here. It expresses regret over waste, but not just physical waste. We started feeling mottainai about wasting our precious time and energy on things that didn't align with our values or actually help anyone in meaningful ways. That guilt we used to feel about saying no, it transformed into a different kind of awareness, one where we felt more regret about wasting our limited life force than about disappointing someone who was used to us always saying yes. What changed when we finally said no? The first few times we set boundaries, it felt weird. Really weird. There was guilt, there was anxiety, there was this nagging voice saying we were being selfish, but we kept thinking about the Japanese tea ceremony, where every movement is intentional, where nothing is rushed, where quality matters infinitely more than quantity. We were trying to live our whole lives like a tea ceremony, being fully present and intentional with where we put our energy. And slowly, things shifted. The people who respected us showed even more respect. The relationships that were built on genuine connection grew stronger because we were showing up as our full selves, not as an exhausted shell. We had energy for the things we actually cared about. Creative projects we'd been putting off for years finally got attention. Hobbies we'd abandoned came back into our lives. We slept better. We felt lighter. Not because we became hermits or cut everyone off, but because we created space, that all-important ma in our lives. Living with intention, not obligation. So where does this leave us now? We're not perfect at this. Some days we still catch ourselves slipping into old patterns, saying yes too quickly, overcommitting because it feels easier than disappointing someone. But Japanese minimalism gave us a framework that we can always come back to. It gave us permission to value space as much as fullness, to see boundaries as gentle screens rather than harsh walls, to understand that doing less with more intention beats doing everything with scattered energy.
The beautiful thing is that this isn't about becoming selfish or cold. It's about becoming more honest, more present, and more genuinely generous with what we can actually give. When we stopped trying to please everyone, we finally had the capacity to truly show up for the people and commitments that aligned with who we actually are and what we actually value. And that, it turns out, is so much more fulfilling than being everything to everyone while being nothing to ourselves. Japanese minimalism taught us that boundaries aren't barriers to connection, they're the foundation for authentic connection. They're what allow us to show up as whole people rather than fragments. And in a world that constantly demands more from all of us, choosing to create space, to honor our limits, and to live with intention feels quietly revolutionary. It feels like finally coming home to ourselves.